Good morning, everyone. We're going to call a meeting of the Board of Supervisors and the Redevelopment Authority to order. Today is Thursday, January 2nd, 2020. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy 2020. We're at it's just after 8:30 a.m. in the Sierra Room at the Community Center at 851 East William Street. Also, we're on the internet if you get charter cable, and we're streaming. Could we have a roll call just for the record there? Happy New Year, Aubrey.
Happy New Year, thank you. Supervisor Giammi.
Here.
Supervisor Bonkowski.
Here.
Supervisor Bagwell.
Here.
Supervisor Barrett.
Here.
Mayor Kroll.
Here, thank you, Aubrey. Can we call in a good friend, Bruce Henderson of the Airport Road Church of Christ? Bruce, get us started off today.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for a new year. A lot of ways we messed up the old one, Lord. But this one lies before us as an open book, empty and ready to be written upon. What a beautiful sunrise you gave us this morning, Father. Significant to me that you're here, you're alive, you're well, and you're watching over us. There'll be times this year that we need to erase our entries, and we ask your help and your strength and your wisdom. We thank you, we praise you, and give you the glory. In your precious and holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you very much. Okay. Ken Beaton, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ken. All right, we're going to now move on to item number 5. This is a public comment. The public's invited at this time to come in on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of this public body. Anybody got public comment anywhere? Hup. Good morning again, Mr. Beaton.
Good morning. I have a concern about South Carson Street, and how I can explain that is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Venturi effect, but if you have a hose and it's 1 inch in diameter and you have a certain amount of water flowing through that, if you put something that's going to restrict the flow in that 1 inch hose and maybe make it a 1/2 inch with the same amount of water, the pressure's going to come out on the other end and increase force. In high school, I know a guy that played a prank that illustrated that, and a number of people, when they thought they were getting a drink from a water bubbler, got surprised because the water with the Venturi effect would hit the 10-foot ceiling instead of coming up a 1/2 inch. And so my concern is, I don't know how you take 3 lanes of traffic. Maybe I need this explained to me, but and get it into 2, and I see a lot of problems. If I was a rich person and had one of the car dealerships on South Carson Street, I'd have a lot of concerns. If I had that multi-million-dollar business that pays a lot of sales tax in Carson City. So that's my concern.
So on your example, what happens if you turn the volume down turn the pressure down on the water? Just, to take the knob and does that help? Does that help if we ameliorate that effect?
You'd have to almost turn it down to a trickle, because you can't believe how many teachers got hit in the face with water when they thought they were getting, or students got hit. And of course, some high school boys had big laughs when it's always funny when it happens to someone else.
Supervisor Bonkowski.
Good morning, Ken. I guess what I would tell you is that if on South Carson Street there were 3 full lanes of traffic, then I would share your concern. But the truth is that we have about 1 to 1.5 lanes of traffic using 3 lanes of roads that we then have to maintain. So reducing the lane, 1 lane of traffic, all you're doing is condensing, 1 to 1.5 lanes capacity of traffic into 2 lanes. There's still plenty of capacity when you look at traffic counts.
Okay, does this take into account for growth?
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, through the studies that we look at are through 2040.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Any other public comment? Anybody want to weigh in this morning? We'll take public comment as we go along usually, and we'll take public comment at the end, and at the beginning and the end of redevelopment. All right. Let's move on to the possible approval of the minutes of December 5th. Everybody had a chance to look at those? Motion's in order.
I move to approve the minutes of the Carson City Board of Supervisors for December 5th, 2019, as presented.
There's a motion and a second with a correction.
That's correct.
As
As
corrected.
corrected.
As corrected. Everybody got that? Okay, on the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. I don't see the electronic stuff coming up here yet. All right. Let's now take up the agenda. Any change to the agenda, City Manager?
No changes.
No changes?
Nope.
Board members want anything changed from what was published? Okay, then I don't hear anything, so unless there's an objection, we will take the agenda as published with no changes. We're done. Now let me call up the radon folks. Let's go up here and I'll do a little special presentation on talk to radon. How are you this morning? All right. All right, ready? All right. This is, we do this once a year, and it's an important thing to do. And we were talking up here before the meeting started about just how important this is. Whereas many Carson City residents don't know about radon, yet need to know for safety and health for their families, as radon is a colorless, odorless, naturally occurring radioactive gas that is the primary cause of lung cancer among non-smokers and the second leading cause of lung cancer for smokers. And whereas the United States Environmental Protection Agency estimates that 21,000 people in the United States die each year from lung cancer caused by indoor radon exposure. And whereas radon kills more people than secondhand smoke, drunk driving, and home fires combined. That's a staggering statistic. Whereas any home in Carson City may have elevated levels of radon, even if neighboring homes do not, and living in a home with an average radon level of 4 picocuries per liter of air poses a similar risk of developing lung cancer as smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. And whereas testing is the only way to know if a home has an elevated radon level, and testing is easy and inexpensive, and when identified, homes can be fixed. And whereas the University of Nevada, Reno's Extension, Nevada Radon Education Program, the Nevada Division of Public and Behavioral Health, and the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States support efforts to encourage all Carson City residents to test their homes for radon, mitigate elevated levels of radon, and have new homes built with radon-reducing materials and features. Now therefore, the Carson City Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim January 2020 as National Radon Action Month in Carson City, Nevada. All right, this goes to you now. We want to hear more about what's going on in the radon world.
Okay, thank you. So this is the 12th year that you've offered us a proclamation, and we thank you for this opportunity to educate you about radon and National Radon Action Month. Your support is very important for all that the proclamation states. It's important, especially in Carson City, as 40% of the homes tested had radon concentrations at or above the EPA action level. Carson City is the 4th highest county in radon potential, and from valid test results, nearly 800 homes had elevated levels of radon.
Are there any particular place in town?
I'm glad you asked that.
All right, all right. All right, getting there.
Zip code 89703 has the highest potential, where 59% of the homes tested had radon problems. Followed by, which zip code do you live in?
Which what?
Yeah, which zip code do you live in? You know,
You go buy it, 89703. I'm probably one of those old homes.
okay,
But I get mine checked.
it can happen in any
I do.
old, new,
Actually, I use one of those little electronic ones that you can buy.
okay,
Okay.
all right. So followed by 89702 at 43%, 89701 at 29%, and 89706 at 24%. The highest radon level in the county is still 100.5, found in 89701. Because testing is the only way to know if a home has a radon problem, Extension is again offering free radon test kits in January and February. And test kits cost $10 after that period. So that's a
They're free
great,
today though, right?
they are. I have a few test kits today.
Pretty good, okay.
Carson City residents can also get a free test kit at the Extension office, 2621 Northgate Lane, Suite 15.
Very good.
And we're also doing a radon presentation at the Carson City Senior Center on January 14th at 6:30 p.m. Any resident can come, not just seniors. And as a reminder, to prevent radon from entering new homes, homes can be built radon resistant from the ground up at less than $1,000 for crawl space foundations or less than $500 for slab and basement. For more information, you can call us.
Taking
We're
notes,
talking to-
taking notes, Mayor.
He's our supervisor now, but he's the old fire chief, so he was up there giving us a lecture on radon before we came down.
All right, thank you.
He knows.
Thank you. For more information, you can always reach us at 188-RADON10 or visit our website, radonnv.com. We have a Facebook and Twitter page also. And again, thank you for allowing us this time to educate you and the community about radon. And hopefully in 2020, we'll save more lives.
Very good. Because, I didn't really it was 11 years ago when I was elected mayor, and then we started doing these monthly rate, or the annual radon month. And actually, one time, it came close to 4 for me, 4 picocuries. And so, I do watch that pretty carefully, and I'd encourage everybody to take a look at that, because you won't know it's happening. It's odorless, colorless, you don't taste it. It just happens. So take a look, folks. Take a look, all right?
Thank you very
All right.
much.
Uh,
Can I add one more
Go
thing?
ahead, sure.
You have this electronic detector, and they're good in the beginning when they're new, but they can't be calibrated like the professional certified
Okay.
testers. Just want
Well,
to
that's why
give
mine
you
is
that.
giving me good readings all the time.
Turn it on and turn it off and reset it, just to make sure.
All right, deal. All right.
Thank you.
Everybody hear that? Who uses the electronic ones? Okay. Sherry, it's over there saying yes. Okay. All right. This goes to you. Take that over. Thanks to Cooperative Extension. Oh, we're going to get a picture. Come on. We're going to do it up here. Can we get the board to come down, please? There's no radon in my camera. Oh, boy.
Just so you know, Brunswick Canyon, all the minerals there, you have decomposing uranium. And that's all part of radon.
It's all part of radon. You're right.
That is not Brunswick Canyon.
Brunswick, 701. Mostly.
It's what we live in.
Right.
Where
we are.
All right. Where you gonna go? Right there? Okay. Got it? Okay.
Thank you so much. So does that just use mailing address or something?
PO boxes. The tested address. Oh, well.
No, it can't
some
be.
people- Some people give us a post office box number, so.
Oh, PO box, okay.
Yeah.
It makes it look funky on the report.
Couple models for this list.
See, we are looking at it.
Yeah, Andy and Mallory both like Prosecco.
That uranium naturally decomposing on the ground.
Yeah, it's picking up just a mailing address. They don't have a separate physical address versus mailing on there.
Well, they're probably mostly 703 there, based on that percentage.
I would bet,
Up in the ground.
Yeah.
I would bet. Mhm.
See how high is Marlboro County, or Pershing County, almost 60%.
Yeah. All minerals.
That's pretty good.
My daughter bought a house in Utah that was brand new. They did the test the first 2 days they were in there, and it was 8. Out they left, and they turned the house back in, and it was a big deal.
Big deal. All right, we ready? We're now going to take up the consent agenda. We only have one matter on the consent agenda. That's the one we do every month. That's a discussion and possible action regarding report on expenditure of each fund in the treasury. Anybody want this pulled? Anybody, public want it pulled? All right, we'll entertain a motion to approve one matter on the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of one item, item number 9.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's now take up item, there were no other items pulled from the consent agenda, so we'll take up item number 11. This is discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of a member to the Carson City Board of Equalization to fill a term set to expire January 5th, 2023. Dave, you want to take us through this? I know we're pretty well explanatory in the,
Somebody.
it's a new year. Come on up and tell us what we're doing, Dave. Right or wrong?
Good morning. This is on, right?
Nope.
You guys have new ones. I haven't been here since the new ones. Wow, you guys are
See,
getting
you
high
don't get
tech.
over here enough, do you?
We have to fix that.
Don't visit us,
I'm okay
David.
staying at my desk, thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning and Happy New Year, Dave Dolly, Carson City Assessor. So today's board action, Supervisor Bagwell's appointee to the Board of Supervisor, or I'm sorry, to the Board of Equalization, moved to Sparks. So that means she's no longer eligible for the position on the Board of Equalization. And I have to say, she did just a wonderful job. Very educated, very knowledgeable. She really did her homework when she had all the appeals that she was looking for. However, Supervisor Bagwell has now, or would like to appoint Margaret E. Green/Wilson. And Peggy, I believe, is what her name is. And so we would like for you to approve her position to the board.
Any members of the public desire to comment on this? Board, we okay? Board, you want to make a motion?
I move to appoint Margaret E. Green Wilson to the Carson City Board of Equalization to fill a term set to expire January 5th, 2023.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay.
And
Carried
she'll be
unanimous.
another fine Wilson.
Very good. More Wilsons. That's
That's
good.
right.
Thanks, David. All right. Let's see here. Where am I? Wait a minute. All right, let's take up item number 12. This is the possible appointment of 2 members of the Carson City Parks and Recreation Commission. You want to take us through where we are on this? There are 2 positions available. One reappointment request was received from Leanne, and a new application was received from Janice Caldwell. Is Janice here this morning?
Yes.
Janice, come on up. How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you. Good morning,
The new year
everybody.
treating you so far after 2 days.
Okay.
Okay. So just give us a little pitch about who you are and why you want to do it, and then we're going to vote you in.
Oh, well,
Take your time to-
oh, really?
Take your time to brag.
Well, I'm an avid tennis player, and so I use all of the courts here in Carson. And I'm concerned about the maintenance of them, so I guess I would,
I've never heard that before about the
well,
maintenance
yeah.
of the tennis courts.
So, so I'd probably be a pain about that. And then I'm a hiker, and I appreciate the trails that we have around here, and I want to keep them up and enjoy them. I've lived here since 2004. And as a side, one of the first people I met when I was here was Donna Curtis, who got me involved, actually in this same episode. It was during the time they were thinking about doing something in Lakeview, making a picnic area or something. I don't know if you all remember that, but I do because I live in Lakeview. We weren't terribly negative about it, but it was kind of a tempest in the teapot, but it kept us interested for a time. So I've been paying attention to a lot of things regarding Parks and Rec. I also volunteer at the museum as a docent. I do Medicare counseling at the senior center because I worked for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services forever. So I'm just interested in doing my part on
Well, we want to
this.
thank you for moving here and getting actively involved in your community, our
Thank you.
community. It's all of our community. So on that note, thank you. And board members, any questions? Who wants to make the motion on this? Do it.
Parks and Rec. I move to appoint Leanne Keever and Janice Caldwell to the Parks and Recreation Commission, each to fill a term set to expire January 1, 2024.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Unanimous.
I think I thank you.
Go do good,
Wait till you come to a meeting.
do good things on the Parks and Recreation Commission. That's good.
Thank
And we're
you.
glad you're enjoying the outdoor stuff.
Right.
That's good.
Oops, wait.
And take care of the tennis courts too. All right? All right. Let's,
Compete with the pickleball.
the computer, yeah. All right, let's take up item 13. This is a discussion of possible action regarding the adoption of a corrective action plan for FY 18-19 statutory violations included in the annual CAFR. These weren't big things, but tell us about it. There was one big thing, but it hit at the right time.
Yeah,
long
we
time,
discussed
depending on
these
your-
when we went over the CAFR at the first meeting in December. So this would be the second time. This is the formal corrective action plan that we have to report to the Department of Taxation. So there were two items. One was a small increase in a grant that we found very late. Had we found it earlier, we could have added the revenue and expense, but we found it after the CAFR was all complete. So for full transparency, we just added it as an over budget item. And then the other one was the large one you were talking about, Mr. Mayor, which is the liability increase. To go over this real quick again, we do in May, when we do our first or second round of augmentations for the year, we look and do a calculation on what we think that liability will be based on what the insurance company has. And then when we calculate the real liability in July or August, the report came back a lot higher this time. They had snuck in a retention for a pretty big claim. So unfortunately, we did have an over budget situation there just because the adjustment in the liability.
You know, I don't know why that's a fault, because that's not your fault, that's not our fault, that's a changing dynamics of litigation going on.
Yeah, and I think next time, and what my corrective action says is we're gonna work with the DA's office just to see if there's anything close to settling, and then we can bump it up based on that as well as what we get from the insurance company. So we'll kind of work with the three different parties.
You know, let me ask you another question. I've always wondered about this, but, you know, and when you sue the city reserves for its potential liability. Is that number that they reserve subject to, is that public information?
I believe so.
How do you negotiate against that?
Well, we don't make it public if it's not requested.
If we don't have a problem, it's not a question. That's a good way, but.
Yeah,
Dan,
right, they're on the report, so I mean, if it was requested, we would have to provide
I don't
it.
think you can do anything under the old meeting law, the Open Records Act. I don't think you can do anything different, but just want people to know that, you know, when there are these things that happen, you can go to the financial reports of the local government, and you can see what they're reserving, you can see what their evaluation is. Now, sometimes that's good, other times not so good, but anyway.
Well, and that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're gonna pay, that we're just being conservative and that might be what we'll pay. So we're reserving that as a liability just in case, but it's not done until it's
Right.
done, so.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Anybody? All right, we'll take a motion to adopt the plan of corrective action.
I move to adopt the Carson City Plan of Corrective Action for the fiscal year 18-19 statutory violations included in the annual audit.
There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Thank you. Let's go to 13 Bravo. This is a discussion of possible action to prioritize appropriation of excess undesignated general fund ending fund balance for the fiscal year 2019 in the amount of $2,523,236. Sherry, you want to talk to us about this?
Sure. So what we did here, we were asked to bring back an item to discuss the savings from the prior year. So that's what I've done here. Staff have made a recommendation, but obviously you're the board, so you can override that as you see fit. Our recommendation would be to put $432,000 to the rifle pistol range for safety improvements. Then to put $1,091,690 to the subscription radio replacement plan. This was the only unfunded portion of that big plan, was the radio replacement in 21 and 22. We already built in the costs for 20, but 21 and 22 are unfortunate, like they're not saved for. They're just part of the capital plan of future years. So I'm recommending that we save that money to fund that. And then the other just under $1 million, I'm recommending we put to capital needs for 2021. I did provide a 5-year projection. And you can see that 21 is about $4 million. We have been spending $7.5 million on capital. So we are a little short in the 21 capital needs column. Now, I mean, you all saw the sales tax information I sent out. It's coming in great. If it continues to come in great, we'll have plenty. But I'd prefer to save that for the budget process so that we can hear all the needs of all the departments and work it out at that time.
Okay.
But again, up to you guys.
We got a couple questions up here. Supervisor Giomi first, then Supervisor Bankowski.
On the radio expenditures, just wanted to clarify that the money will be spent in the fiscal years identified. So we're just reserving the money aside for that, not pre-buying those radios now.
That is correct.
But buying them at the time.
That is correct. We're just holding that money aside for those years.
And I had another question, but I forgot what it was. Give me a second.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a second.
Sure
I'll
thing.
kick you to
Don't worry
Brad.
about it. Brad?
Following up on Stacy's question, that we haven't determined the number of radios we're actually going to purchase, so that number will likely come down anyway in 21
could.
and 2020, most likely in 22. If you go to the budget worksheet that you included, can you just kind of run through why the ending fund balance for the final fiscal year 19 doesn't match the beginning fund balance for fiscal year 20? Just to
So
clarify
that's the
for people.
savings. So that's the savings. So the final budget is what was submitted to the state. So that is not including the augmentation that we'll do, rolling all the fund balances forward. The final audited 19 is what we actually made. So those savings is the difference between that, plus the restricted money that we have to roll forward. That's that difference.
Right. I just wanted it to be clear, number one, that because they don't match, normally they would match. But
Yes.
secondly, we don't actually have a 21% ending fund balance because those monies are going to be spent.
Some of it's
Or
restricted.
restricted.
Right, and then once we make a decision on what to do with that money, we'll put it in the augmentations and they'll match.
And then, yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you on the 999,500, that as long as it's not designated towards anything and just is going towards capital, undesignated capital, I just think that we have to look at the CIP at the time that we go through the budget process to see where those funds should go.
That's what we typically do, is we hold any savings in contingency until the following year's budget, where we roll those into capital or whatever those needs are in the following year.
Very good. Supervisor Barrett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just go on beating my dead horse and say capital needs could include roads, and we'll make that decision later. I'm really concerned, and I've been concerned all the time I've been in office and before that about our roads. And we made a decision recently that I didn't think was the right decision, but that's okay. I get to be in the minority often. But anyway, when we get to the point where we're doing capital needs, let's talk about roads.
Okay. Supervisor Bagwell.
So I just wanted to clarify on the radios. Does this include, if I'm not mistaken, it was all the money that was on the prior report concerning the radios? So would a portion of that actually be charged if their fund is not a general funded account? We'll actually charge them the radios to the proper locations. So this money is just a tentative placeholder until we get to the final number of radios and then charge them to the proper funds.
That's correct. Where we put it in 2020, because we have funded 2020, it's in the 210 fund, capital fund. So that's where we'll probably move it. It's just savings in the general fund that we're earmarking for radios.
Yeah, I just want to make
As-
sure
And it's
that,
of course as needed. I mean, if they end up spreading it out more than 2 years, so they're gonna buy some in 2023 too, we'll just roll forward that amount as needed. And if they don't end up buying as many, then that'll go to other capital needs.
thank you.
Sherry, on the rifle range, what's the total amount that do we know a total? Take it to bring it
I
up?
believe we're having that item today for the rifle range, aren't we?
Yeah.
So I think it's on the agenda today.
Next.
The next item.
You want to bring it up then? That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have it on my top of my head.
Okay, don't worry, that's fine. I know it's coming up. Okay. All right, all right. Public comment on this? Anybody? Board, we okay? Motion's in order.
I move to appropriate the fiscal year 19 excess undesignated general fund ending fund balance as proposed.
There's a motion and a second on the motion discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried, thank you. All
Thank
right.
you very much. Great
Thanks, Sherry.
questions, everybody.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Keep the sales tax flowing, man. It's nice to have money to spread around rather than having to take money. Okay, all right. Let's take up the next one. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the rifle range. All right, this, we're on item 14 alpha.
Good morning, Carol Akers, Purchasing and Contracts, and yes, thank you for approving the last item so that we could roll into this one. So this is for the discussion and possible action regarding a determination that 4 Point Engineering is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder pursuant to NRS 338, and whether to award contract 193-00095 for the Carson City Rifle and Pistol Range Improvement Projects to Four Peak Engineering for a total not to exceed amount of $809,410. That does include the base bid amount, $628,162, the bid alternate for the short range for $107,665, and then also the 10% contingency, which the total contingency amount is $73,583, which will not be technically put into the account unless it's needed.
Okay. How are you doing this morning? Happy New Year, Jen.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Okay, you want to talk about this a little bit?
I'd be happy to. Mr.
Good.
Mayor, Board of Supervisors, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. It's nice to be here today to have some good news for the rifle range. I just wanted to provide a little quick background on how we got here and what the plan is moving forward. Just a reminder, the city received 2 independent reports, one from the National Rifle Association, that both recommended operational and physical improvements to the rifle and pistol range. The city really took that seriously and implemented actions to address those concerns. To address the operational improvements, we hired a range coordinator and have that budgeted. It's a full-time benefited position dedicated to the rifle and pistol range. For the physical improvements, the city retained Loomis and Associates to provide design and engineering services. The design parameters included the NRA range sourcebook, which identifies those minimum recommended standards, and also considered ballistic profiles from each of the firing lines at the rifle and pistol range. The engineer's estimate for the project was $933,960, so the bids came in significantly lower than that. We had a really diverse funding strategy, so we didn't hopefully overburden the general fund, and we tried to leverage what funds we had available. And we knew that going into the current budget, so we allocated funds from not only the capital improvement program, but also from quality of life funds as well, in anticipation of that. Outside of this project, and it's not in your staff report, we are taking steps to implement NRA best management practices. I'm really proud to say that the staff negotiated a $0 contract for lead reclamation at the facility, which will be starting this Friday. And we received several quotes for the service, some over $60,000. So we have a lot of efforts going out there to not only have good environmental best practices, but make sure that the facility is operating in line with those standards. The construction project will be 40 working days, weather permitting. If we have the weather that we've had right now, we shouldn't have any weather delays. And then once construction is complete, we'll be able to significantly increase the operating hours for the benefit of the public and be able to operate while the landfill is open.
Very good. Questions of either Jennifer or Carol? Chief?
First, I want to compliment you on your stick-to-itiveness with this. I know it's been a struggle for your department, and your idea to bid this in the winter was spot on, as you said earlier, so congratulations and thank you for doing that. I had a quick question on the lead recovery. Is there a chance we get money? I didn't know the details of that until you said it, because I am aware of some lead recovery where it could actually generate funds. But I didn't, getting a $0 thing is great. So if it doesn't generate funds, that's fine too. But I guess there's no chance of that.
There are several different options. We did actually contact the lead reclamation company that you recommended as well. We contacted several. Each one has a different approach with how they do it. Typically, they'll give you a quote. Let's say it's $60,000, and then you share in the benefit of that, and it lowers your price.
Gotcha.
So either way, you still have to pay for that activity. The fact that we're not paying a dime and they have all the insurance and all the requirements, I think is a win for the city.
Well, thank you for that. The other question I had is, I usually don't get into the weeds, but I had a slight concern on the import material. It's one of the more significant costs. And this bidder was significantly, like half or less than almost all the other bidders on their fill material. And do you have any concerns? Has someone looked at that? It's almost like they're stealing. I'm not accusing them, but it's almost like they're stealing the material somewhere. It's a really incredible rate compared to the others.
I don't want to speculate, but my understanding is the subcontractor for this bidder, just based on location, will have lower trucking costs compared to the other bidders. So I think that's
Okay.
a huge factor.
You're not concerned about the number then, in other words?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Brad?
And Jen, so looking at this, it looks like we would have a early March completion date for construction?
Weather permitting, yes.
Weather permitting? And then once the construction is completed, we would be going back to a 6-day schedule
Correct.
with all the ranges being closed on Mondays.
Yes. Yeah. We do need a maintenance day.
Right. And then what improvements, if any, are not included in these remediation plans based on the recommendations from the two entities that gave us reports?
On the lead reclamation project or this
No,
contract?
on
this contract?
On the safety improvements.
On the safety improvements. There are a few outstanding items. So one thing in the NDOW grant that I brought forward previously was signage improvements. Park staff will be overseeing that portion of the project. It's I think $6,800-ish that we'll be doing signage. So that was all of the social roads that lead to that property need to have Carsonite markers saying that they're entering, a firing range to meet those standards. So we're putting those in. There's also signage that will go in at the firing lines as well, particularly on the covered lines, and we'll be putting those on the posts to comply with those operational suggestions that the reports had. I think there's some future projects that could be grant-funded projects that we've already talked to NDOW about. One being an eyebrow on the backstop for the long range that was really recommended by both reports and has worked well at the Clark County shooting range. And then a possible baffle at the long-range firing line, and then additional drainage improvements to meet those environmental best practices. So I think those are some future projects that are all eligible for grant funding.
So looking long-term for possible relocation of the range, which we've talked about extensively, are there any portions of the NDOW grant that will create an issue for us going forward if we had a 10-year plan for relocation?
No, I think the only thing that will, typically those permanent structures that you can't relocate are the ones that have the higher life expectancy, and like the vault toilet, we could even relocate to another facility. We're not doing any improvements other than dirt improvements that wouldn't have the lifespan that would extend beyond that life expectancy of the facility at the current location.
And then finally, I always, I'm not familiar with this contractor, but it's always good when we have multiple bids. So in this case, the bid came in significantly less than our engineer's estimate, but we actually had 3 bids that came in pretty close to one another. And this particular contractor has plenty of municipal experience. So I think that those are good signs for us. Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay, you want to give it, just in case I didn't hear it, what was the total amount after we do this, what we'll have invested in the new rifle range?
With the construction and project management costs, it's $818,410. Previously, on the Loomis contract for design and engineering, we spent $47,000.
Okay. Is there a fee? Are you going to start charging fees or not?
We have been working on a fee schedule for the entire department. The Range Task Force and the Parks and Recreation Commission did approve and recommend a fee schedule that will be going to this board for consideration. We're going to bring this as a package, I'm hoping, during the budget process to implement, and it will be something that'll be annually reviewed. The Parks and Recreation Department fees are very outdated, haven't been addressed since the early 2000s, aren't consistent with the market, and we want to meet our cost recovery goals that were outlined by the board. So I see that coming as part of the budget process, and then we'll be implementing them based on the board's direction.
Very good. Lori?
I was just going to comment on the sign portion, to not forget the opportunities for naming rights or people to sponsor that we worked hard on in the Range Task Force and at the Park and Rec Commission. So I see that just as a reminder to everyone that you can get your name on a sign, but maybe we can do a little recovery there too. It's definitely an expensive project, and I just wanted to go on the record because I continue to see a lot of Facebook postings or things of that nature that indicate that the city somehow is not invested or not going to open the range. And I hope today that certainly this expenditure will show everyone that we're very serious about this range and that we look forward to having it open back for public use just as soon as possible. So thank you again for all your hard work and perseverance.
And we can let our surrounding counties know. All right. Any other questions? Public comment on this issue? Anybody want to weigh in? I don't see anybody. Motion's in order.
I move to award the contract as presented.
Oh, come on up. Sorry. Hang on. We were in the middle of a motion.
Sorry, go ahead.
You want to make a comment? We're in the middle of a vote, so it's a little difficult. Do you want to talk about what we're voting on, or?
Oh, you go ahead and vote. I'll let you vote.
All right. We'll take that. I'll take that. All right. We're on the motion then. On the motion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay. Yeah, well, I've got a motion in progress. That's all. I don't want to.
No discussion?
Discussion's in order.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the Range Task Force, Brad and Lori, Jen, everybody who worked on this. I'm an old hunter, and I'm really old, so I don't hunt much anymore. But this is a project that costs a lot. I'm glad we're doing it. There is a large cost involved, but the truth of the matter is, this is a segment of our population that deserves. We've had it. It's kind of like the golf course. It's just one of those extra things we try to do. So again, thanks to everybody.
Other discussion? All right, now, everybody in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carried. Okay, now, why don't you just stay there for a minute? Take your comment. That's fine. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Heiko Mitch here in Carson. I've been here 50 years and used the range in various locations. And the only thing, I'm glad you guys, Jennifer here and everybody in the Parks Department is working to get this back open. The only thing I'm feeling is a little apprehensive that this range is going to be partially privatized because obviously nobody can use it right now. And then once you open it up to the public with all your rules, not to mention we all do everything safely out there, it may be just for commercial people that have gun shops and people that do concealed carry instruction, and basically the public is still going to be left out. That's all I'm trying to point out. Thank you.
Well, you want to address that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jennifer Budge again, Parks and Recreation Director. So I just want to put on the record, the facility's never been closed. It's always been open and available. We did have to reduce our operating hours because of the conflicts with the landfill. So while we've only been open on Sundays for the public, and we've tried every time we have a holiday, we were open on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Right now, the majority of the use is available for commercial use now because they may provide their own range safety officers. They have insurance and they have the mechanisms in place to be able to operate Tuesday through Saturday. Our goal is to open this back up for the benefit of the public. I want more than 50% of the use at the range to be for the public. If we have reservations and we have commercial users that want to use that, we'll still have space available for the general public to use the facility. So we want this to be a true public facility where we're educating users and providing a safe place for people to shoot so they don't have to go out in the desert and just conduct that activity safely. And that will include a lot of education components as well. We have a really good vision of improving that public education and use component, and I think this is what's going to make us be able to get there.
Okay. All right. Good comment. Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. And by the way, Jennifer, a pat on the back for getting more money out of the Hawkins Foundation for upgrading the front end of the community center here, the lobby area. It's a good deal. You can say something if you want.
Sure. Thank you so much. The Hawkins Foundation notified us they had a little extra money at the end of their 2019 budget. So they were so happy to just participate in the Bob Bolduc Theater, the lobby remodel, that they sent us another $5,000 that we didn't even ask for. So I think this is a really good partnership with them moving forward.
Very good. All right, thanks. Okay. All right, let's take up 14 Bravo. This is discussion and possible action regarding contract number 193-00103, Nevada Legislative Representation with Walker and Associates for an amount not to exceed $65,250 through June 30th, 2021. Carol, you want to talk to us, and Nancy, you want to talk to us about what's going on here?
All right, so under this contract, Walker and Associates will perform research and fiscal analysis for legislative committees, meet with legislators, monitor legislative committees and the statewide financial committees. They'll monitor and provide updates of pending legislation for the interim and also for the 2021 legislative session. We have the contract beginning today, and that is to provide coverage during the interim legislative session and the many committee meetings that are being held from now until the session begins. So for over 20 years, Carson City's been part of the Western Nevada Legislative Coalition with Lyon County, Douglas County, and Story County. And all of the other counties are also retaining the services of Walker and Associates through the 21 legislative session. And we have Steve and Mary Walker here if there's any questions for them.
Questions of Nancy? Carol, anybody? Public comment on this issue? I don't see any. Anybody? Motion's in order.
I move to approve the contract as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. On the motion, all in favor, discussion. Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, carried. Thank you. All right. We'll be in recess for 10 minutes. We're in recess for 10 minutes. bring the meeting of the Board of Supervisors back to order. We're now at item number 15. Hope, you ready to go?
Yes, Mayor.
Talk to us about parking, please.
Certainly. First, just in general, the Board of Supervisors is is authorized to approve a text amendment. A text amendment is essentially we're changing the rules of development. You don't usually get these. The Planning Commission conducts a public hearing and makes a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors based on 3 required findings. Those findings are substantial compliance with the master plan. The amendment will provide for land use compatibility with adjacent uses and not be detrimental to other properties in the vicinity. And the amendment will not negatively impact existing or planned public services or facilities and will not adversely impact public health, safety, and welfare. So I'm just going over those general parameters because you so rarely have a text amendment. The Planning Commission in particular was concerned why this text amendment was coming forward absent the entire Title 20 rewrite. We have an applicant. This is applicant initiated. This is not a staff initiated text amendment. The applicant paid a fee and has requested that this be considered by the city. So that is why this is before you, before a larger package. Having said that background in terms of the specifics, the applicant, currently our code does allow for tandem parking, but only in the downtown mixed-use zoning district with a planned unit development, in mobile home parks, and in RV parks. Otherwise, the driveways and other areas to move a car in and out of a parking area is not considered to be an off-street parking space. So if you have one of those traditional driveways that's long and you have to move a car to navigate another car, it only counts as one parking space, even though you could stack your vehicles in your driveway. The applicant is requesting to allow tandem parking for single-family residential uses. This would allow for flexibility in design. At its meeting of December 17th, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing and voted 6-0 with 1 absent to recommend approval based on 4 standards, which are incorporated into the ordinance. 1, the parking can only occur if there's a special use permit as well. Secondly, the internal and abutting streets must provide for parking on both sides of the street or guest parking at a ratio of 1-to-1. The tandem spaces are provided on the individual lots for the exclusive use of that lot. And the tandem parking space must have the dimensions of 10 feet wide by 20 feet in length, excluding the width of the driveway. I just want to comment on 2 of these standards. 1, the size of the parking space was recommended by staff. Right now, in our design standards, there is a parking space size for a parking lot, not for a single-family residential. When you read the driveway standards and the design standards, it identifies what the width of the driveway is, a minimum and maximum width. It identifies the slope, but it doesn't designate a length. So staff thinks it's really important to recognize what will count as a parking space in terms of length, because we do see, particularly with the PUDs, very short driveways that you kind of have to wonder if you could even get a car in that driveway. So I think that was a really important addition. The other important addition, which was really important to the Planning Commission, so I want to relay it to the board, is they sort of were supportive of some flexibility, but they didn't want to write a blank check. They said, we're not really sure that we're understanding what all the unintended consequences could be. And so with that, they wanted to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Right now, with a special use permit, you can have an increased building height. You can have an increased sign size. And so their thinking was, well, let's subject it to a special use permit. And so when we consider tandem parking, we'll consider those 7 required findings for the special use permit, and it will be on a case-by-case basis based on the ability to make those 7 findings in the affirmative. They did not want to delegate that responsibility. They were very specific because they did talk about whether it would be an administrative permit versus a special use permit, and they felt it was important that they have the public hearing and they make the decision. So with that, the Planning Commission did recommend the approval, but they did also want to see it on a case-by-case basis and make the decision based on the findings for the SUP. John Karpatic is our applicant. To just I think some board members have asked questions and maybe some haven't, so I just want to put this on the record. Mr. Kropotkin does have a tentative map pending. So it's still at the staff level, and it does rely on tandem parking. That's not before the planning commission, it's not before the board. What's before the board right now is to basically change the rules to say you can have tandem parking. So it's not specific to his project, it would be across the board, which is why the planning commission wanted to require the special use permit. So it wouldn't be across the board as an allowed right, it would be across the board subject to their approval. So that is the background, and I think I'll stop there, Mayor, and John Kropotkin, the applicant, is present.
Okay, Supervisor Bonkowski.
Hope, the current allowed tandem parking has a requirement that one of the allowed spaces is within a structure or garage. Is that correct?
No, the city does not have a requirement for covered parking.
Say that again a little bit.
In some jurisdictions, there's a requirement for covered parking, which means parking would need to be in a garage or under a carport. Carson City does not have a requirement for covered parking.
Okay, thanks, excuse me.
I thought I read somewhere that, so, because I was just wondering why we wouldn't continue that and say that tandem parking would be allowed as long as one of the counted spaces was within the garage space.
It looks like it talked about it.
If you go under your staff report, under discussion on the first page, it says, development standards allow for tandem parking in the downtown mixed-use zoning district for residential development if at least one space is within an enclosed garage or parking structure.
I'm sorry, which page of the packet is that?
150.
It's under the staff summary, Hope, on your staff report.
I think it is.
Mayor, I think it's specific to the downtown mixed use. I need to read my code, and I'm happy to do that while Mr. Kropotkin presents or take the next question.
Which I think is the only place that the tandem parking is allowed other than the mobile home parks and PUDs, right? Okay, so that was my only, that's what I was curious about, is if we would want to add that standard. Anyway, if you want to go
You
through
want
the
to
code.
take a
and
look at that? I've got a couple of other lights up here. Do we want to hear from the applicant, or just, you want to, you don't have to say anything, the applicant, we understand, but come on up and feel free to tell us why you did all this.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Supervisors. John Kropotkin. We've been working with staff about 7 months on this project, and this one came as a bit of a surprise to do the single-family detached small lot. And we do, in fact, have two-car garage, but it's two-car tandem, right? And so I've done gobs of research with the major home builders all over the country that are doing this, and it works flawlessly. It's an inconvenience to the property owner, right? You choose to buy a house there. Affordability is key because we're managing space differently. Instead of going side by side, you go by like this. Whole length of the garage is two spaces, plus you have one in the driveway. But the Carson City Code recognizes that as one space. So that's what got us here at this point. And I haven't heard anything negative about it. The PC was pretty cautious, I guess, in saying, let's look at this, at least give you a provision to go forward, but we want to look at it on a special use permit basis rather than just a wholesale code amendment. And, we're fine with that. We were hoping that you would just say this is okay. People ask, well, what about the people parking in the street? And does that really displace guest parking? And I go, it just doesn't work that way. People that are buying a 1,700 single-family square foot home with 2 or 3 bedrooms and a tandem garage and a driveway space are not coming in there with 3 and 4 cars, and there's no RVs. It's a very specific buyer group. That's really what's going on. I believe from everything I've learned that it is a very good product and affordability is key. I do not have a PowerPoint, but I wanted to show you an image of, this is the exact project that we're trying to put forth. It's a cute kind of cottage-looking single-family detached house. And it's not garage dominant, so that's one of the selling features in terms of the way you form the neighborhood. But you can see that that's a narrower garage than you typically have. So it does become, I happen to have a tandem garage, and my wife's a school teacher, and we're always jockeying every day. That's the way, and it is an inconvenience, but we choose to park in the garage and not use it for storage, and it works. But it's definitely inconvenient compared to side-by-side parking, so. I got a lot of information, but that's all I had, Mr. Mayor, so
That's
be here for
okay.
any questions. Thank
Any
you.
questions? Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you.
There's a question, that maybe I did have one too. So
Yeah.
let me just, and this goes to Hope as well. If he has a map, can the special use permit cover all of the potential buildings, or does it have to go each individual item?
I would anticipate the special use permit would come forward with the tentative map, so it would capture that neighborhood. They may exclude some of the lots based on specifics of that lot. For example, I just say that lot fronted an exterior road as opposed to one of the interior roads. But that would be an option the Planning Commission would have, but the idea would be to take it forward with the map as opposed to each individual lot. I also, if I may, Mayor, have an answer to Supervisor Bunkowski's question, and I apologize. Heather Ferris took the lead on this and is out sick, so I'm pinch hitting as best I can. Obviously not so great. Okay, so Division 2 of the Development Standards addresses parking. In Division 2, there is no requirement for covered parking. Division 6 of the Development Standards identifies the downtown mixed-use standards. And yes, you may use tandem parking in the downtown mixed use only if one of the spaces is covered parking. So if the board if the board wanted to create a mandate for covered parking, it would be a bit different than what else we see in Division 2, but it would have some relationship to Division 6. Thank you.
Go, Lori.
So I guess part of my question starts with, this applicant brought this item and paid $3,200 or whatever to bring the item. If you're now going to require a special use permit, now have to go get a special use permit to bring the item back and pay again for this same item. And then, so I don't really think that's quite fair that he didn't bring it to ask for a special use permit. He brought it for a code change for everyone. And I know in the past, we've waived the special use permit fee for that particular applicant. But my question kind of goes along with Supervisor Bonkowski, that if we were to require that it be, one of them be covered, do we need a special use permit? Does that not actually take care of the issue for us by requiring one of them to be covered? That way we get a garage. I mean, I think that's the issue, right? Is to ensure that we get a garage in the residential area. So I just bring that up as a point of discussion, that maybe we don't need a special use permit if we add in the condition of requiring one to be covered.
Yeah, it's just staff's thinking in reviewing this proposed amendment. We felt it was very important to make sure the driveways or the garages could actually accommodate the vehicles. That was critical because we've seen where that hasn't occurred because of the absence of that language. We felt it was very important that the street system accommodate on-street parking or guest parking. The staff did not escalate it to a special use permit. That came from the Planning Commission, again, because of unintended consequences. They just aren't sure what those are. And so they really want the opportunity to look at it, piece by piece. But I understand what you're saying, but just that came from the Planning Commission.
second question. And then I had a additional question that I spoke with earlier with the district attorney's office. When I looked at number 11 on page 147 or page 3 of the packet, 11 and 12, it really deals with private parking lots and public parking for recreational vehicles not being allowed to be occupied for living or sleeping purposes. And we did some research because that appears to me that nowhere can any public or private lots be used for overnight sleeping in RVs, but we actually have an exception in Title 13 that the park director can give. So I would ask that when this comes back, the DA's office works to put except as otherwise provided in another code or whatever appropriate language is necessary there. So that was just another cleanup for when you come back on second reading.
Okay, while we're on that side, John, Supervisor Barrett, then Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Hope that I think everybody, or maybe not everybody in the room, but at least all of us know the answer to. Special use permit means that it would be in existence if it were passed by the Planning Commission and then only come to us as the Board of Supervisors were there to be opposition that filed. Is that correct?
Yes and no.
So, go ahead.
You're correct, the special use permit, the planning commission has the authority to approve a special use permit and it only comes forward to the board on appeal. Having said that, I would anticipate these requests would be coming in with tentative maps. So the board would be seeing them at the time of tentative map. That would be my expectation. I don't really see individual houses getting built, and I mean, they could certainly come in, but that would be an infill lot, and then you would not see it.
Okay. Can you give me an estimate if the current situation requires, let's just say, 50 parking spaces, and we made this change, what would the developer be required to have? How does it change in numbers?
It does not change the numbers. Right now, a single-family residential home, and that's all we're talking about is a single family. There's no change for commercial properties or multifamily. A single-family residential home is required to provide for 2 parking spaces. It would still be required to provide for 2 parking spaces. Although, if there was no on-street parking or on both sides of the street, they would also have to provide for guest parking in the subdivision at a ratio of 1-to-1.
And how, you've seen the tentative map, we haven't. How wide are the streets where the on-street parking would go?
Sir, they are the urban street width standard per this Carson City code, parking both sides, and the ratio just happens by chance, not by any brilliance in design. It's funny how it just shakes out that our guest parking ratio is 1 per unit. So we basically have 3 off-street, right? And then 1 per unit on the streets, parking both sides. We do have, I don't remember off the top of my head, it's either 32 or 34, I don't remember. I just know what the code requires.
The reason that I ask is I faced this situation for 25 years when I lived in another state in the Midwest. And I can tell you from personal experience, almost day in and day out, what happens is because of the putting 3, let's say, 2 in the garage, 1 behind it, or 2 behind it, if you had that much space, 1 behind it. What happens is you're always, as you said, it's inconvenient. So you're always, I need the car and it's in the garage, or I need the car and it's behind you, and so people park on the street a lot of the time, especially if they're running in the house to get something and then going back out, et cetera, et cetera. So it puts a heavier load on the on-street parking. I'll make up my mind later, but at this point, that's a problem for me.
Mayor Kroll, may I?
Yeah, shoot.
What we find is that the buyer, and this is, I think it's key to making the whole thing work. Small houses on small lots, people that have 3 and 4 cars, want large lots, want large houses, they buy elsewhere. And I think that's, you know, certainly not reflected in any of the regulation, but you see single-person households or double with 1 or 2 cars. That's really what's going on. Thank you.
I got the chief down here. What, is there a follow-up to this one? Or a new topic? Chief, jump. Supervisor, I call you chief.
You can call me anything you'd like.
Just not late for dinner.
So as you talked, more questions popped into my head. So you said that on the tentative map that you're looking at, there is cluster parking in addition to full street widths? Is that what I heard you say?
There's not cluster parking.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the lot parking and the street parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hope, you mentioned during your presentation on reference to the PUD. I mean, I could see an instance where, an SUP where we would want to limit, for instance, this kind of arrangement to streets that are not collector streets, for instance. Because in my mind, if you're going to have this kind of an arrangement on a street like Mountain Street, where you're going to have to pull out into the street to get the garage, the second car out, it's going to cause a real problem for traffic flow. And so I was originally thinking that I wasn't 100% on board with the SUP, but I can see some needs for it. My personal feeling is that and it's just my observation, I don't have any empirical data to back it up, but the vast majority of people put crap in their garage, not cars in their garage. And so I have a concern that that's exactly what's going to happen, and you're not going to fit 2 cars in the garage. I just don't think it's going to happen. And so is the driveway in these residences wide enough for 2 cars, or is the driveway not wide enough to accommodate 2 cars? And it sounds like, based on what I'm reading, the driveway would be, you're specifying the driveway width, which is actually you're specifying the garage width, but that's essentially the driveway width too. Is that correct? So the driveway would not accommodate more than 1 car. I mean, it could be made that way, but this code does not require that.
As written, the code, what the ordinance before you does not change the city standards regarding covered parking. So the covered parking that's required in Division 6 continues to be required. The covered parking that's not required in Division 2 continues to not be required. Having said that, and I don't know if you all have been out to, say, Jackson Village, I think those driveways are 7 feet deep in some instances. So in writing this code, what the staff included was a minimum dimension for that thing that's going to count as a parking space to ensure it can indeed support a parking space. Absent this wording, the city does not have a minimum requirement for a driveway, for example. So if you look at the driveway standards for single-family residential, there's a maximum slope, there's a width requirement, minimum and maximum width, but there's not a minimum depth. So our objective is to make sure that we can realistically fit 2 vehicles.
But that's in the driveway.
It could be covered or it could be uncovered. It's silent.
So let me throw a scenario. He's building the house that he's showing you right there. That garage meets this definition. 10 feet wide, 20 feet deep, correct? I mean, I'm asking Hope. So.
We would if this passed, we would make sure it did. I have not looked at his floor plans.
So is there anywhere in here that it specifies what size the driveway must be? Because you're counting the 2 cars in the garage, not in the driveway.
No, right now, the code does not today have a requirement on a driveway width for single-family residential, and the code before you does not either.
Okay, so the driveway in this scenario, based off of this code, if we do nothing, could literally be 5 feet deep, the driveway.
And it could also be 5 feet if you had a 2-car garage with the cars parked side by side.
Right, okay. There's no change with that, I get that. since there are other tentative maps out there that we know we've approved, this has nothing to do with that. I mean, they could use this themselves as well. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, if if this were adopted, they could come after the fact and ask to use and request an SUP.
And since we're bringing it up all at this time, was there any thought about fixing the depth of the parking space in a PUD since you're bringing this up now? I mean, it seems to me that it would have been logical to do it if we approve this.
Actually, Heather and I did talk about that because when we were talking about the size of the space, we said, really, we should have this requirement across the board and not just for the single-family residential that's outside the PUD. Having said that, we wanted to keep this very discreet and based on this request. So we didn't go broader, but I agree with you. And I think ultimately we'll probably look at minimum driveway widths because I think there's a benefit to that. We're having issues even in Silver Oak on that. And also look at required parking lots or parking space sizes for single-family residential.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Brad and then Lori.
Okay, I think what I see here, first of all, I'm going to go on the record and say that I like tandem parking. I think that it is a valuable tool, planning tool, and it allows designs that are less garage dominant. And I think that what we're talking about here, in essence, what it does is it cleans up our code and transfers some of the parking accommodation off the street and into the driveways. Right now, if you go over to Pheasant and Edmonds, there's driveways over there on some duplexes that are literally like 4 or 5 feet in length. And the only way you can park a car is sideways across the entrance of the driveway. So I think that this is a really good idea. I think that there's some details that we need to flesh out. I do think that the 10 by 20 minimum size is a good idea as long as you vet that size and you're satisfied that it's sufficient. I think that we do need to have a standard that requires one space in covered parking. So within a garage, again, it's a planning tool for aesthetics. But the reality is that if you have a 20-foot driveway and a garage, and you're parking a car in the garage and a car behind it, that's 2 parking spots. But yet we don't count that, which puts additional burden on developments and is using up more land that goes under concrete or impervious surface that could necessarily be landscaped. So I think that there's a lot of positives to this. We just need to figure out the details of it. And I do agree with Lori too that if this applicant were to come back and request an SUP as part of their project, I would be in favor of crediting them or waiving that fee because of the fee that's been paid for this item. Thank you.
Lori.
My questions were answered. The rest, thank
Chief? You know, I mean, I keep getting hung up on the driveway, and it seems to me that if we're going to count one, I mean, I guess I would be okay with a 1-car deep garage, provided that the driveway is sufficient depth to hold a car. Because I think, you know, that's part of the hangup for me. I mean, I look at some of the subdivisions where my daughter used to have a house in Sparks, and that my truck, which is a standard sized truck, could fit in her driveway and hung out on the sidewalk. So I would be amenable to. I mean, in fact, it's almost preferable to me to have the driveway count as one and the covered count as the other, because I really don't think a tandem garage is going to be used to park 2 cars. I just don't think people are going to do that. I think they're gonna fill half of that garage with their stuff. And if the driveway isn't long enough, then people are gonna be parking on the street, number one, or they're gonna be blocking the sidewalk, number two.
Mayor, may I real quickly add to this? It's key because I appreciate this conversation. We specifically requested just under 11-foot width, which is larger than a one-car drive width, and 20-foot depth, for all the reasons you just discussed.
On the driveway.
On the driveway, that is correct. And I went into the research of a Yukon XL. It's not the worst-case scenario, but it's a very large vehicle in the relative scheme. That's just under 18 feet. So it accommodates, the high 90 percentile of type of vehicles for parking legitimately in the driveway.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying.
Thank you.
But the code is not
Exactly
that
right.
way.
But just so you know that we're completely on the same page in terms of managing that space. Thank you.
Let me just ask Stacy a question. Follow up, where do you see that the driveway would, if he's saying that they're gonna have 20-foot length, where does it say that the driveway is not gonna be included?
Well, it's addressing the tandem garage. The language change is addressing the tandem garage and is not addressing, if you look at page
Oh, I see.
146, number 2, internal and number 3, the tandem spaces are provided on the individual lots for the exclusive use of the tenants. But it's a tandem, it's a garage that we're talking about, right? I mean, do you agree that this does not speak to the driveway, correct?
Let's just
Speak-
say
well-
garage or, it's garage or. driveway.
Essentially, I think to answer that question, it's not assuming a garage, but it's not assuming a garage. It's saying wherever those parking spaces are, whether they're in a covered or uncovered, the space has to be 10 by 20. And you show that on your site plan. So it could be in the garage stacked. Having said that, if your suggestion is that when you utilize this provision, the driveway must have a depth of 20 feet, I mean, we can certainly add something like that.
I guess what I'm saying is, and maybe I'm looking at this wrong, if the, this does not say if the tandem parking is all in a garage, it says the garage has to be 10 by 20 minimum. So if the developer provides a tandem garage accounting for 2 parking spaces, the driveway, under the way this is written, could be 5 feet deep. Or it could be 0 feet deep.
Could be 1 foot.
Because the 2 spaces
Garage.
that are required by the code are covered in the garage. That's the concern that I have.
I agree with them.
I share that concern.
Yeah.
The driveway needs to be able to, that's why I said I would trade off having a 1-car deep garage, but having that second spot be in the driveway.
Stacy, couldn't we just on number 4 or add a 5 that says the driveway portion must be a minimum? So and do our cover, that one of the parking spaces must be in a covered, and then the minimum on the driveway portion,
Well, did you have a suggested?
if that makes sense.
Mr. Mayor, based on what I've heard so far, I'm anticipating, and this, I don't know how the vote's going to go, but this is what I've heard. In addition to language that's before you in the proposed ordinance, you would introduce it with a modification to number 11 that appears on page 141.
Wait a second.
I'm
Let
sorry,
us find it.
147. It's what Supervisor Bagwell brought up.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, that would
Yes.
say unless otherwise noted in the
Right.
municipal code. We would add language that would require that when you use tandem parking, one of the spaces must be covered parking. Now, I do need clarification from the board on that because that would include a carport and not be specific to a garage. So if the board's intention is that it needs to be a garage versus a carport, then instead of saying covered parking, we should probably say should be in a garage. And the third, sorry.
Can I ask a question on that? So can that determination be fleshed out under a special use permit? Because in the case of a mobile home park, a carport probably is appropriate, but yet in single family, it's probably not. It should be a garage.
Yes, that could be handled at the time of special use permit.
This is single family.
And then the third item I've heard the board discuss is when we use tandem parking, we would add this language. The driveway must have a depth of 20 feet exclusive of the sidewalk. I beg your pardon?
Do you want to do width and depth? So 10 by 20?
The code already speaks to the minimum width of a driveway and the maximum width of a driveway, so I think that's covered. The code does not speak to the depth of a driveway.
John, Supervisor Barrett, he's got a question or so.
That would satisfy me, what you said. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not so much a question as a comment, and that is that what we're doing here is we're trying to take care of one problem, but it will have precedence for other problems. And so that's why I just wanted to say Brad is right. We have to write this thing perfectly because we're looking down the road. Others will come in and say, oh, well, now I can do this or now I can not do that. So although obviously the developer has brought up forward a nice thing that's affordable, and that's part of his concern, as part of our concerns as well, to have more affordable housing, I'm not sure we can do this to solve his problem and all the problems that may come with it after we've made the changes. So I'm kind of inclined to say we need to go through the process that brings us the whole thing as a package.
I don't know, my own 2 cents is that, you know, we're looking at an applicant's proposal here. At least for me, I think that the special use permit process that the Planning Commission added takes care of a lot of the unintended consequences. I believe there are going to be unintended consequences. So I like the special use permit, and I like the addition of the length of the driveway, because I think that's going to be, I think the chief is absolutely right. I mean, in my garage, I'd like to think I could put 2 cars in there, but, you know, my wife has got first dibs on all of them. And that's not for cars. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Christmas decoration. Chief?
I think the driveway language actually does fix the problem so that it would apply whether you could be doing a tandem garage, and it now requires the driveway to be a minimum depth. I think it addresses not only this applicant's issue, but future issues where people are compromising, at least in my opinion, on the length of a driveway when we know they're going to park cars in the driveway.
Brad, jump in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the 3 issues that we have, do we have covered or uncovered parking? You know, I'd like to see at least 1 space covered. We need to address the length of the driveway so that we ensure that the driveway can be used as a space, that it's adequate, and then everything else can fall under the SUP for project-specific requirements, and that solves the unintended consequences. We know that we have a minimum of 2 parking spots, if not 3, if there's a tandem garage. So you have 1 in the garage, 1 in the driveway, potentially 2 in the garage. To me, that gives us the basis to move forward, and the special use permit gives us an avenue to correct any potential variances or deficiencies for project-specific requirements.
Let me ask the applicant where you are on, did you hear what Supervisor Bonkowski just said?
Yes.
You okay with those?
Yeah, that's exactly what we have designed. And I think that the key is transferring, if you have the con man developer type, I can understand what you guys are saying in the concern of, you really want to transfer it to the development, the responsibility, and that's what it covers, right? When we deal with these dimensions on width and depth of the driveway. And that's exactly what we're doing. I just showed Hope our exhibit per the tentative map, and it's 10 feet, 8 inches on the width, 20-foot depth. So I think we're completely on the same page. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Okay, Lori, did you have?
So just in general, if we pass this with the amendments that we're discussing, what does that do? Does that mean anyone that goes to pull a building permit only if they're going to use the tandem, right? But can we put in here, so my question becomes, can we actually put in here the driveway depth minimum that would apply to everybody?
That's a different code section, so that would be outside this section. But that does bring up a question, Mayor, if I may. What's before you is simply for the single-family residential development. We've talked some about the shortcomings of the existing provisions, specifically with PUDs. So in preparing the additional language, I want to just confirm that we're staying with the single-family residential development, not revisiting the existing regulations relative to PUDs, and that would come under a bigger umbrella.
I think you have the answer to that.
We do?
I think.
We do?
Well, let's answer it, because I'm not so certain that you can get there outside of an old meeting law issue. But go ahead, shoot.
I guess my comment would be that I would rather see us address other sections of the code sooner rather than later, so I don't know that I'd be satisfied waiting for the Title 18 rewrite to do that.
I would concur with what he's saying there. I don't want to, we're doing such a great job fixing the driveway issue. I don't want to let a bunch of PUDs or anything else come in, so.
John, sorry.
I just raised the point that, and again, affordability is one of our strong desires, to find housing that's affordable. But this leaves if we do this, leaves it with the planning commission, and it doesn't come to us unless there's a dispute. And so we find ourselves in the same position the planning commission found itself in regarding this single item, that they wanted to have the hammer. I still think this board needs to retain the hammer on the final analysis of these situations. So I just want to raise that as something that we're going to give away if we do this.
Okay. Supervisor Jomey?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in the code that is an SUP that I don't know, as a board member, I want to deal with on a biweekly basis. I mean, there's a lot of things that get down in the minutia. On the PUD, I'm in agreement with Brad and Lori. I mean, I think I'd like to bring it back sooner or later and not have it, wait around, with the understanding that there might be a lot of things that you want to change in there, but since we're talking about driveway parking, let's at least address that now, and then, then we can wait, in my mind, on the other things as you're moving them forward, because we've identified a flaw, and that I think we should fix it if we're going to fix it here to be consistent.
Other comments or discussion? Come on up. Comments, come on up, public comment.
Denny French, Carson City.
Hi, Denny.
Mayor and board. Denny, I did that. Slow down. My concern is that there was just a report suggesting that auto manufacturers are also going to add another 7 inches to their vehicles. Going big is in style right now. My consideration as a walker, I'm walking out off of sidewalks to get around vehicles that are way too long for their driveways now. That's a lot en route because of the narrowing of the property and the expansion of the street. But in other areas, it's just very clear to me that manufacturers aren't really considering sizes of vehicles, so most vehicles aren't in garages. And so that leads to a lot of other storage considerations that they'll use it for. So I would rather not have the blanket or the code changed as a blanket, but that each consideration as far as development be on its own terms. If it needs a special permit or such like that, those things should be considered at that time. This big code thing, I think, is really involved, and since there's a lot to it, that I'm not for that. If there are things, and I really appreciate the 20-foot, but that leaves for an 18-foot with the additional sizes that are added with people's specialized bumpers and their different gear on the back of the vehicles. I don't know how many times I thought I had the space to walk around a vehicle without considering the fact that they've got a deal for a trailer on it and other things like that, and have had to recreate positioning. And I'll save the rest of my comments for later, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Denny. All right. Any other public comments? All right, board. I sense somewhat of a consensus, But let's try a motion and see where we are. We'll see what happens. Chief, you want to make a motion or somebody want to make a motion down here? Brad, you want to do it?
Let me try it. Okay, so I move to introduce on first reading bill number
101.
101. Imagine that, first bill of the year. With the following modifications, and Hope, help me out. First modification is to item number 11. Pardon me?
If you'd like, I can summarize what I had read earlier.
That'd be wonderful,
Okay.
thank you.
On page 147, number 11, include wording that it is unless otherwise noted in the municipal code. Add to the provisions of page 146, number 6. The added language include that one space must be covered. Also include that the driveway must have a depth of 20 feet exclusive of the sidewalk. And the board is requesting that we include this wording for the PUD provisions as well as the single-family residential development. Also, I don't know if the motion should include a fee waiver on the SUP. I'll leave that to you.
Probably the best way to do that is a second motion, just to keep it clean. All right. Before we get to, is there a second on that? If your motion incorporates what,
My motion would incorporate Hope's comments on the record.
I'll second.
Yeah, I was gonna say
all
I'll
right.
second.
There's
But
a
on
second and a
discussion.
couple seconds, but we're on discussion now, so we'll see where we go.
And can we allow in that motion and that there can be general conforming language that the DA's office can make to flow all of this for the reading? I just want to give him some latitude to really arrange it in case he goes to do something in the section 6 and then realizes he's got to put something somewhere else. So in just conforming, allow him the opportunity of conforming language.
Okay.
If the motion makers will
Yeah,
accept.
I'll restate the motion when we're done with discussion, if that's
Discussion?
okay with the
Anybody
board.
else on discussion? John?
Yeah, I, with all due deference to the current developer before us, I think he's right about his project perhaps, but other people may put their cars in the carport or their garage, and in this case be garage, in these types of houses. But again, people's families change, people reach driving age, people get cars. You're probably right in terms of who goes in them initially, and there'll be 2 cars. But in truth, there'll be 3, especially if you have the longer driveway. And then people will be moving in and out all the time. I've experienced it. And they'll park on the street because they don't want to park and have to get it out with a car behind it. Happens, and so in other developments, if not in this one, I think you'll find there are problems with not adequate street parking as we go forward. So I just wanted to bring that up. I also still think this is the final body that should make these determinations. Stacy's point is well taken that we don't want everything to come before us, but these are not all going to conform to this particular development. They're going to be different configurations, so I'd still like this body to make them. That's my only comment.
Gentlemen. Pardon me? Dan? I didn't see your light on.
Sure.
You didn't
No,
turn it
I
on.
was going to wait until after this action was taken, but I guess this would be a good time. So just let me chime in on a couple of matters. So one, before second reading, I will make sure to coordinate any additional clerical changes that are needed with the deputy district attorney that worked out this proposed language. I mean, I've already gone through it and I've spotted a number of clerical changes that I'll probably want to make anyhow. So I wanted the board to be on notice that when it comes back for second reading, the language will look quite a bit different. Just from a technical standpoint, substantively speaking, it's not going to deviate from what we've discussed today.
All right. We'll be in, stand at ease. We'll be in recess until we find out what's going on outside there.
Somebody fall. Retired firefighter's kid.
So if, at the pleasure of the board, I'll restate the motion.
Restate.
I move to introduce on first reading Bill number 101, including the modifications read into the record by Hope and allowing staff to, the latitude to make any typographical or other technical changes to the language to bring it back for second reading.
There's a motion and a revised, well, there's restated motion and the second agrees on the motion is restated. Discussion? Hearing any?
Yeah, I'll
Go.
just bring this up. I'll probably vote no on this. I'm going to continue thinking, but I won't have much room to do that. And I will wait to seeing that final language before I decide what my final vote on second reading will be. So we'll go forward from there.
Okay. Any other discussion? Let me just say, you know, when I was first mayor, we had an individual add on to his home or their home, a second covered parking structure that didn't meet the setback requirements. And, you know, we told that person, take it down. So, you know, this, if we apply it, you know, give the planning commission the tools under the special use permit, that's great. We ought to also make sure that our enforcement people are out taking a look and making sure that people don't make unintended construction plans if they don't know that this exists. Because it's the hardest thing in the world to tell somebody, you take down what you've built up. All right. All right, further discussion? All right, hearing none. Let's take a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mine already said aye.
It's
It's voting for us.
What did it do to John's?
Well, it voted the wrong way. If it did that, I'm voting no.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for, all right.
We can bring the other motion back later. No, right, not today. The waiver we'll bring back later.
Okay, we're ready to recess as the board. We're going to turn the board, turn the gavel over to the Chair of Redevelopment, Lori Supervisor Bagwell.
I call the meeting of the redevelopment to order and let the record reflect all members are present and we have a quorum. Is there any public comment to come before the redevelopment authority? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 19A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the election of the chair and vice chair of the redevelopment authority for a term ending December 31st, 2020. Do we have a motion?
I move that Supervisor Bagwell retain the Chair of the Redevelopment Authority. I move that Supervisor Bagwell retain the position as Chair of the Redevelopment
That's an
Authority.
appointment. I already did public comment. I did public comment. Nobody ran up. Okay, sorry. I have a motion to appoint Lori Bagwell as the chair of the redevelop. Did I have a second?
Second.
And a second for the redevelopment chair. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, I'll take a motion for the vice chair.
I move to nominate Supervisor Giomi as the Vice Chair of the Redevelopment Authority.
I have a motion and a second to appoint Stacy Giomi as the vice chair of the redevelopment authority. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to final public comment. Is there any public comment on this to come before us? Okay, seeing none, then if there's no objection, the redevelopment authority is adjourned, and I'll give it back to that one.
Hate to do this, but
Needs a break?
very short break.
Oh, we could take, well, how about 45 minutes? We'll stand in recess for another 10 minutes.
45 is fine with me.
Take up item 23. This is discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of members of the Board of Supervisors to various positions on boards, committees, and commissions as required by law. We do this every year. And every year I say, even though I'm appointed to something, I'll be happy to give it up to someone who wants it. So, and we're also going to do this, since Granicus is picked up, it doesn't pick up each of these as individual motions. We're going to do a vote internally here, and then at the end, we're going to do one final vote that includes all of them. So, all right, so let's take up Mayor Pro Tem first. Supervisor Bagwell, go.
I move to appoint Brad Bonkowski as Mayor Pro Tem for 1-year term ending December 31st, 2020.
Second. There's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion?
Discussion.
Excuse me, I thought we were going to do them.
He said he wanted one each and then one full
Well,
motion.
let's try it like this. If it just looks like it's gonna, is there another motion other than this one on Mayor Pro Tem? Okay, let's go to the next one then.
Okay.
Okay, Parks and Rec Commission for 4-year term.
I nominate Lori for the Parks and Rec Commission for a 4-year term ending January 1st, 2024.
Second. Any other vote, any other motions? Okay, let's take up RTC, 2-year term.
I have a question on this one.
Can it be a 1-year?
Yeah, I'd like to retain my seat on that, but I'm only going to be in office for 1 year and not 2 years.
But this is not your seat.
It is his seat.
It is my seat.
Oh, it is your
It's
seat?
not mine, it's his.
Oh, so then we have to change it to a 1-year.
So Dan, is it possible that I can have a 1-year appointment to the RTC instead of a 2-year appointment? But
You
then
could get
they're
it 2 and
staggered.
automatically you be
Or
off.
is that the solution? I get appointed to a 2-year term and then I vacate the seat at the end of the first year?
I would advise the latter, not the
Yeah.
former.
That's
All right.
fine. So I nominate, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, I'll nominate Brad to the RTC for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2020.
Okay, let me do it like this. And any other nominations?
No.
I don't see any. Okay. Audit Committee, 1-year term.
I
Me?
Lori did.
I just hold on to it
motioned it.
tomorrow. We'll
We're
make
gonna
one.
make one motion.
We'll make
for
one
you.
final motion.
We're just
to keep
kind
it
of
straight.
Fill in
recommending.
the blanks and then do it.
Okay. All right. On the audit committee, go.
I nominate John.
For the audit committee?
He's on it now, right?
No, I am.
Oh,
We already done all of RTC?
yeah, we're done on RTC.
There's only one.
Kinda did it under the radar there, but that's okay.
Did we miss something?
Well, we can go back.
You want on RTC? John?
No, there's just one appointment on RTC.
Right, and it's
This was RTC for a 2-year term?
Right.
Okay.
Brad.
Any other, we'll go back to that one. Any other, Supervisor Bonkowski has been nominated. Any other nominations for that? And we'll take a separate vote if we have to. Okay, I'm not hearing any, okay. Or did I?
Yeah, no, never mind.
You sure? All right. I don't mean to be, don't mean to run over anybody on this. Okay, let's take up the audit committee, 1-year term. Lori? Okay.
Yep.
NACO, Chief Giomi, you want to be on that one?
I would like to, yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, I would like to.
Anybody else want to be on NACO? Any other nominations? I don't see any. Okay, let's take up the alternate to NACO for a 1-year term. Who wants to be,
Lori can stay as alternate.
Lori? To the Western Nevada Legislative Coalition for 1-year terms ending December 31st, 2020. I'm on it and Brad's on it now, but we're not going to be here for the next legislative session. So who'd like to be on that?
I'll nominate Stacy and Lori.
That's fine.
And then I can stay as the alternate if that's okay.
Great.
All right. Let's try this then. Everybody know where we are? Because I'm going to try a master motion here.
We're missing the last one.
No, that's Brad.
Oh, it's Brad. Okay, I just didn't hear anybody voice it.
All right. Again, I don't want to run over anybody. If somebody wants to,
Oh, I see.
wants to be
Okay,
on
okay.
something, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, then we'll entertain a motion to appoint Supervisor Bonkowski as Mayor Pro Tem for this year. Lori Supervisor Bagwell will be appointed to the Parks and Recs Commission for a 4-year term ending January 1st, 2024. Supervisor Bonkowski will be appointed to the RTC for a 2-year term ending December 31st, 2021. The Audit Committee, Supervisor Bagwell will be appointed to the Audit Committee for a 1-year term ending December 31st, 2020. Supervisor Giomi will be the NACO representative for a 1-year term ending December 31st, 2020. And the alternate will be Supervisor Bagwell to the Nevada Association of Counties. On the Western Nevada Legislative Coalition, Supervisor Giomi and Supervisor Bagwell, with Supervisor Bonkowski being the alternate. Anybody want to make any changes to those?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the motion. Discussion?
Just discussion.
Discussion's in order. Go, John. Supervisor Barrett.
Thank you. I briefly considered challenging my supervisor to the right for the position on the RTC, but nobody nominated me, and I was loath to nominate myself. But as I said a couple of weeks ago or so, I'm really concerned about roads, and I was concerned about the fact that we're going to send this to a vote of the people even 2 years later. We need the roads fixed, and so while I disagree with her, she has every right to her opinion, and putting her on the RTC was something I considered challenging for her, but I won't.
It wasn't my appointment that was up on the RTC.
They're
Just so you, they are not.
According to this, it's just mine.
No, just Brad's.
Just Brad.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. Just
Okay.
gonna let you know.
I thought they were both up.
No.
As I read it, it looked like they were to me.
Okay. Everybody still clear on the motion? Further discussion?
So I just wanted to say that it's been a real pleasure to serve this last year as your Mayor Pro Tem, and that I know that Supervisor Bonkowski is in his last year, and I think he'll really enjoy the opportunity to, and hopefully not have to exercise it because you're going to be well. for this
Well,
upcoming year.
I want to thank you, Lori, for stepping in. Not only did you step in twice this last, towards the end of the last year, once when I was at the League of Cities in San Antonio where I happened to get sick. And the next one, I think I should say this again, I thought I was going to get well for the next meeting in December. And I was already all dressed to come down here. And my wife told me at 10 after 8, she said, "You're not going anywhere. Put me back to bed." And I said, I'm laying this off on Lori again. She said, make the call. So I called Lori, and immediately the answer was, "Sure, Bob, take care of yourself." So, that helps a lot to know that the board can move like that with that alacrity. And thanks for giving me the time to get well here. All right. Anybody else? Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, now where does this thing come up, or is it not coming up?
Moving right
Tamar?
along.
There it
Yeah.
is. All right. Man. Okay, let's take up 24. Hang on here a minute. All right, well, on non-action items for the Board of Supervisors. Any non-action items coming up for 2020? Sure?
I'm sure.
Anything else the board would like to see?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment. I have sat in this seat for a year now, and I just, you never know what you're getting yourself into until you actually do it. There's just no way to know what you're involved in. But I want to thank the rest of the board, my fellow board members. I'm impressed with all of your work ethics, and I'm impressed with the dedication you have to our community, and I'm proud to work with you. So I just want to thank you for a great year. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. That's democracy at work. All right, any other comments or questions from the board? Go.
Yeah, I appreciate Stacy's comments, but who really makes us look good up here is staff. So without staff, we'd just be up here looking like a bunch of clowns.
Well, I would argue, I would argue we still kind of look like clowns, but maybe some more than others.
All right. Anybody in the audience want to weigh in on who's a clown and who's not? We're on public comment. Come on up, Denny. You can get into clowns if you want. Go ahead.
Thank you. Don't want to put a damper on this at all. I just want to thank you all for your work and efforts. Everybody's, it's not like you surprised me, because I think Carson City has held a pretty high standard on what they consider important as far as their supervisors. And thank you, Mayor, and I'm glad you're feeling better. So that's that on that, and thank you all for your work and continuation. It's just one of those jobs that I fear is just not as, it's sort of thankless in some ways. I've struggled to keep up, but I've appreciated, even when I'm not really sure what's going on, your professionalism and your grace and your consideration. So thank you. On two things that I'd like to, well, there's three and 4 or 5, but I'll try to keep it short because I'm sure you're all active to get home. And again, thank you very much, all of you. It's been a pleasure to watch you, and I'm sorry I missed the December meeting as well. So I've had 2 physical contact encounters with vehicles in December alone. Those were the first in the year of physical contact with a vehicle. I had a near issue with a sheriff officer that was making a left turn and didn't see me in the right of way. And we had a close encounter of maybe 3 feet. But the physical encounters, one person never even saw me. I had to do a straight arm to get myself enough projection away from the front of his vehicle.
Where are you talking about?
I'm talking about College Parkway and the route there area. Gentleman was making a right in a large truck, and I was peripherally only seeing him because he's making his right turn when I'm walking across. So that was scary, but the other one was right up here at the corner. A gentleman in a SUV type vehicle, an older gentleman, didn't see me at all, but he had slowed and stopped, and I thought we'd made eye contact, and I was just a few bits from the curb. I didn't have a chance to sort of change my trajectory. And I had to pat on the top of his car to have him see me, and he was surprised and shocked. Luckily, he didn't respond by stepping on his gas. I would have been crunch. Considerations about deer. Deer on Carson, deer on Northgate, deer on Roop. They're moving a lot more, not just dawn and dusk. You'll find them out during the days. At night, it's extra special. Like to remind the community that we just had a earthquake, and it was a 3.6. It was December 26th, to remind us all that we need to be prepared. Just the basics. Make sure you have things so they're not going to fall on your kids and critters, and everybody's safe. Also, the cold weather, I'd like everybody to consider watching out for their animals. Make sure that they're sheltered properly.
Actually, I think, Denny, just to update you a little bit, our health department did a community preparedness exercise within the last 2 years. So they've been around the community telling folks, what you should have for emergencies. So I want to thank you for bringing that up and let you know that the staff has been working on that one.
I appreciate that very much. I'd also like to encourage all of us to consider the lobbyists as very important parts of our connections with our legislative interests. Carson City's just not getting what I think from the state in lieu of funding. So I'd like that to be on their agenda as consideration. Also, recent experiences with the Capitol, I observed hazards that I felt were immediate concerns, and they weren't dealt with for 4 days. And I hardly slept. I wanted to just sort of take my own action. It would have been simple enough to do. But because I try not to do civil disobedience activity, I would have had to call the police and have them watch me do it. They did take care of a young man named Michael Carpenter, came out within an hour of when I reported it to the last person there at the Capitol, which was a staff member of the front desk for the governor. And the young man came out in simple matter of unplugging several different units of wire and putting them aside, not over the walkways. But those type of things concern me, and that got me thinking, every building should have a first response for things as minor as that. Either have the security go out, they weren't able to handle it, they put it on to grounds and building, and then that took time to relate. But the immediate situation needs cones, hazard tape, or perhaps those fold out watch your step when it's wet situations. Those should be on everybody's minds as having them in the facility and all the staff trained to know where they are. It would have been simple, just put a cone out till the person could come and unplug it, or put a tape up to make sure that there was something that was warning the public and such. Don't want people hurt and don't want the liability considerations. Easily corrected, but just at least the basics. See something, say something. When I talked to personnel at the Capitol, they said they'd walked right past it and they go, oh my gosh, but they didn't tell anybody. And I'm going, I don't mind telling people. I can come off as a pain in the butt, but I'm hoping instead they see that I'm just an extra pair of eyes. And I'm concerned about this community and the people in it. And so I would hope that we would, as a city, consider having those small items available some point in your building that everybody would know was available. So they would take my report, they would pass it on to the proper people to relate to it. But meanwhile, those areas would be coned or at least made aware, made clear to the public to be careful or watch out. So that's another one of my things. And I think I've pretty much covered what I wanted to, but again, to thank you. Because I know just a little bit of reading that I'm doing about the city's water analysis, I don't understand most of it, and people are going to get stuck having to answer my questions, but I appreciate that. Bring up 2 other factors, Supreme Court considerations about Pahrump wells, and then also Reno versus Lemon Valley. I think those cases will relate to our future considerations as far as development. And so when they have their findings, those things should be taken into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Denny, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Okay. Any other public comment? Board, are we ready? Anybody? Anybody want to talk more? Okay. Without objection, we stand adjourned.